Hello everyone, HBC here, and today I bring to you a fun video where I talk about my top 5 of favorite wrestling matches of all time. 2024 was a great year for professional wrestling, especially on a personal level, where I was able to go to two pay-per-views and to even start training wrestling. It was amazing, and 2025 promises to be an even greater year, especially in the pro wrestling world where WWE will go to Netflix, and who knows, maybe I will compete in a show at some point. Not WWE, I think. I've seen crazier things, to be honest. But in a show in my country, who knows? We shall see. So, my top 5, there's lots of great matches in here, and some may argue the quality of them, and some may argue why they are even here. But what makes, for me, a match to be in my top 5? There are many factors, to be fair, because a wrestling match has many components. You have the wrestling itself, how it's done, what story it tells, and then you have the crowd, the reaction of the crowd. Uh, if you are watching on television, the way the commentators sell the match itself, um, and the emotional investment, most and foremost. And that's also the reason why some matches ended up here, because of the emotions involved. Also, that anticipation one had to watch that match, because some companies are really good at hyping up the matches with video packages and with promos during the weekly shows and stuff like that. And yeah, many of the promos and video packages sometimes are even more iconic than the match itself, but that's another story. Right now, let's get to the top 5, shall we? And to top 5, it's a match that happened this year, and it holds a very special place in my heart because it was the first pay-per-view I went in, Backlash France. Oh my, what a show! And this match may also be here because mostly of the crowd, because let's face it, Backlash France had the best crowd of all time. In the pro wrestling world throughout the years, I've seen great crowds. I have seen the ECW crowd. I have seen Raw after WrestleMania, particularly WrestleMania 29 crowd, that was nuts. European crowds overall are also great. There was the Backlash in Puerto Rico. That's something that got me hyped to go to Backlash France as well, because I knew that the crowd would be fire and I really wanted to experience that, and I did. And yeah, for number 5, I choose Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles, the main event of that pay-per-view, or premium live event, whatever you want to call it. That was a great match. The Even the beginning, or even the entrances, they added so much to the show, mostly because of the crowd. And il est vraiment phénoménal. Those chants, oh my gosh, that was iconic. And the crowd jumping and making the hard cam bounce. I've never seen anything in my life. And even though that experience sounded great during when I was there live, on TV, I think it came across even better because like you could see a greater footage of the things, and you could see uh, the even the camera bouncing. It wasn't noticeable, of course, when I was live. I could only feel the people jumping and stuff like that, but I couldn't imagine it was something so intense. And then the match, yeah, it was a great a great first title defense, excuse me, for Cody Rhodes. The match itself was awesome. Many memorable moments. Again, the crowd was one of the biggest highlights of the match. We've got great moments like um, the burning hammer kick out near the end. Some may argue that one shouldn't kick out at one from the burning hammer, and although Cody didn't land on his head or neck, it was still a move that had a tendency to be heavily protected throughout the years. And yeah, some may argue that, but for me it was fine, and it was a really cool uh, first title defense for Cody, and I loved it. It was really fun, and this is why I chose Cody versus AJ Styles for number 5. Um, Now, moving on to number 4, and the number 4 is directly related to this number 5 because it was Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns Part 2 at WrestleMania 40. So we had Cody versus Roman 1 year before at WrestleMania 39. Everyone thought that it was Cody's time to finally finish the story and win the WWE Championship. But it wasn't that night. And I'm glad it was like that because the emotional investment for WrestleMania 40, it was even greater. I think that match specifically, I think I've never been so hyped to watch a match, and I feel like I have never felt so emotionally invested in a match more than Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40. And it's interesting because if you look to previous WrestleManias or even other previous shows where that happened, but I don't remember anything outside WrestleManias where a storyline was changed to fit in a specific crowd demand, because we had Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30. He wasn't supposed to be in the main event, and even less to win the WWE Championship in that show, and he did because the crowd was heavily invested in Daniel Bryan, and they had no choice but to put Daniel Bryan against Batista and Randy Orton in the main event of WrestleMania 30, because if that didn't happen, we would have Batista versus Randy Orton, and no one would really care. And even though it wasn't as much like that, but we had some main events of WrestleMania that didn't have that much investment by the fans. Like I feel like John Cena versus The Miz and Roman Reigns versus Triple H at WrestleMania 32 fit in that category. And yeah, Cody versus Roman. I mean, the match itself, wrestling wise, I don't think it didn't stand out, but the moments and the emotional investment is what led me to being here in the number 4 position. Because if you look closely, there were so many stories that got connected in one single match. We had the Seth Rollins and the Shield story playing a role in that match. We had Solo Sikoa and John Cena. It was also a storyline from that year. We had the Usos, which were feuding in that moment, and they had the match in the night before. Also, The Rock and The Undertaker interaction, and also The Rock and John Cena interaction. Also, two storylines from the past. They also played a role in that match. And yeah, there were some. It felt like. I don't think there was any wrestling match and also wrestling show that felt like a season finale thing than that match specifically. I really enjoyed it, and the emotions after the match with Samantha nearly crying. Hell, even I felt like dropping a few tears after that match because it was really that good and I was that emotionally invested, and I really wanted to see Cody uh, finally win a WWE Championship. He somewhat similar to Drew McIntyre, who actually won a world title as well in that night. Although it was interrupted by a certain Punk and a certain Priest. uh, but yeah, I feel like it was strong storytelling, and I am glad. I don't know what plans they had for Cody Rhodes for WrestleMania. We all thought we would have The Rock versus Roman Reigns. Maybe we'll have that at WrestleMania 41. We don't know, but I'm happy that it ended up the way it did. I feel like they made a good decision, and yeah, although some may criticize Cody's title reign, I feel like it was the best decision back then here at WrestleMania 40 to have things play out the way they did. And so we move on to number 3. And number 3 is my OG favorite match of all time. Back then, I started to watch wrestling in 2006. My first match ever was Rey Mysterio winning the Royal Rumble match. And from then on, I became a fan. At school, other people would be fans already, and I've heard lots of people talking about WrestleMania 21, many months before that Royal Rumble, where Rey Mysterio won. And yeah, kids would pretend they were wrestlers and doing like switching musics and stuff like that to one another. I actually took a switching music by accident at school years later, but that's another story. It felt quite stiff, but I was fine. It was just the sole of the boot eating my mouth and nose. Oh dear, memories, very fun. But yeah, while those kids at school probably don't watch wrestling anymore, I still do, and wrestling is my football or soccer if you are American. Yeah, it's my football, aka soccer for some, and I I choose a match from near that time. Not that near actually. It was like more than 6 years after I started watching wrestling, and I choose a match from WrestleMania 28, Undertaker and Triple H, Hell in a Cell. So that match, we already had classics before, with the Undertaker. I also remember that John Cena, Batista, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Undertaker, all of them would be involved in a classic match at WrestleMania one way or another. Of course, some of them missed a WrestleMania between WrestleMania 22 and 28 due to injuries and stuff like that. But whenever they would put any of those 5 guys in a WrestleMania match, they would shine. And yeah, I saw classics like HBK Undertaker WrestleMania 25, HBK Undertaker WrestleMania 26, HBK retired. Then we saw the match that somewhat saved WrestleMania 27, Triple H and Undertaker at WrestleMania WrestleMania 27 in a no holds barred match. And then we got the climax, the match that was billed as end of an era, and we had HBK being the special guest referee, and wow, that match was a great almost an hour of professional wrestling. Those 2 guys, and also HBK, of course, he also did some things, but Undertaker and Triple H would make that Hell in a Cell really live up to the hype, because they would go really physical against one another, lots of chair shots, and lots of moments, and that kick out by the Undertaker from that switching music and pedigree combo is also one of the most iconic WrestleMania moments I can remember, and also the Hell in a Cell, if I recall correctly, the cell itself also had an entrance by a Metallica song, I think, and I think Undertaker also had a special theme song by Johnny Cash or whatever. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Yeah, something like that. I think it was in that show. And in the end of the match, all three embraced, and that part of the show ended on a high note. And although it was billed as the end of an era, it ended up like being once in a lifetime. John Cena versus The Rock. It ended up not being end of an era because those three guys would end up sharing the ring years later in Saudi Arabia, and also John Cena and The Rock. It wasn't once in a lifetime because they had a rematch at WrestleMania 29, and of course later they met each other at WrestleMania 40. Although it wasn't a match between both, and yeah, that number 3, I love it. And next, the only non WWE match I'm going to choose in this list. And the year was 2018. New Japan Pro Wrestling was on fire. I still remember my first New Japan Pro Wrestling show I have ever watched. It's funny because I remember, other than one or another situation, I pretty much remember the first shows of each company I watched. I remember the Royal Rumble with Rey Mysterio. TNA, I don't remember. AEW, I started watching since the beginning, so yeah, it was cool. Stardom, I also remember All Star Grand Kingdom 2023, where Mina won the white belt against Saya Kamitani. We had Julia lose the red belt against Tam Nakano, stuff like that. And New Japan Pro Wrestling, we had. I remember. I don't remember. I don't remember if it was Wrestle Kingdom 8 or 9. I think it was 9. The one where Shinsuke Nakamura faced Kota Ibushi, and we had Tanahashi versus Okada, and Okada left crying. That was my first New Japan show, and yeah, that was, in my eyes, the golden era of New Japan Pro Wrestling. And years later, we had the Wrestle Kingdom with a special touch, where, in my opinion, these two guys were in the best stages of their careers. We had on one side the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada, who has established himself as the biggest star in all Japan, breaking records with his IWGP Heavyweight Championship title reign. And New Japan was expanding globally, and still is, of course. But that was a pivotal moment in that company's history. And in the other side, we had the cleaner Kenny Omega, who wanted to be the face of New Japan and wanted to be the most important gaijin. Gaijin means like it's a foreign wrestler outside Japan. You want to be the most impactful gaijin in the company's history. He wanted to lead New Japan in that global expansion, and he wanted to prove himself by winning the IWGP Heavyweight Championship against the most dominant champion in years. And I still remember that we had the Young Bucks, or rather, we had the commentators saying that he talked to the Young Bucks before the match, and they told them, "Are you enjoying the show?" Because the show was really good until that point. And the Young Bucks told, I think, Kevin Kelly that, "Okay, you haven't seen anything yet." So that foreshadowed that Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada would be a match for the ages. And oh my. And I feel like I need to rewatch that match because it was so good. If you compare that to video games, for example, that match was like The Last of Us or the Uncharted 2, it was just that good. Started slow and stuff like that. It got into an epic tone. They were pulling all the stops. They were going stiff against one another, and they stole the freaking show. And I loved watching that match, and it felt like, oh my gosh, I want to experience this match again as if I haven't watched it yet. It was that good, and I loved it, and it's worth taking the number 2 spot. And now, number 1. Some some may think that okay, the matches before are better than this one, and they might be, but that match represented an era in professional wrestling that I really enjoyed, and I feel like everything in that match was perfect. From the commentators' reaction to the match, from the crowd, from the wrestling itself, from the storytelling. I think everything was spot on, and I loved it. And I'm talking about the black and gold era of NXT. NXT was on fire in 2016 and around those years. I feel like it winded down a bit when the pandemic struck. Um, but one match, actually, let me get back before the match. One thing that I always loved to watch were the NXT takeovers. They would always outshine the main roster, and yeah, this one I think it happened before some WrestleMania. I think WrestleMania 33. I think, not sure, but the match I'm talking about is Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole for the NXT Championship, who was vacated back then by Tommaso Ciampa, I think. And he also appeared after the match and embraced Johnny Gargano. I guess some truce because they were having a feud. And yeah, uh, Gargano versus Adam Cole was excellent. Those near falls, those kickouts. I mean, some may think that some moments were a bit overkill and the match could have ended a bit earlier, but I really loved it. I think it put Johnny Gargano in a place where he won't touch anytime soon in his career right now. Johnny Gargano felt like he was like deserving the main event spot in anywhere in the world, and I feel like man. I'm remembering that one of the kickouts near the end where okay, he took the finisher. I don't remember the name of the finisher by Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish. Then he took the last shot, and then Gargano kicks out from all of that, and the crowd goes wild, and Mauro Ranallo as well. Mamma mia! Oh my gosh, those moments made it very iconic in my mind and in my heart, and that's why I selected that one as number 1. NXT Black and Gold was awesome, and that match, for me, it represents the vibe, the quality. It represents what was awesome from that era. And yeah, that's my top 5 of pro wrestling matches. I could also give an honorable mention for the ladies and for tag teams. Although tag teams, I don't have anything in mind exactly. For women, there's one that comes to mind. Also from NXT Takeover Brooklyn. Yeah, I think it was the first Takeover Brooklyn actually. It was Bayley versus Sasha Banks. It was a great match, one of the best matches ever done by a woman. I really loved it. Of course, that bar was broken later we had like classics like Charlotte versus Becky Lynch in WWE Evolution. The woman in AEW also shine bright in Stardom as well. But yeah, I feel like Bailey versus Sasha was the one that stood out the most. And tag teams, I remember seeing lots of great tag team matches in NXT Black and Gold as well with the Revival, aka FTR. I remember FTR versus uh, American Alpha, Jordan, Jason Jordan and Chad Gable. Also with DIY. And I also remember the Bucks versus Lucha Bros and the Bucks versus Omega and Eggman Page. And yeah, it goes on and on and on. I could also list like there was that tag team match in a random uh, Road to Wrestle Kingdom show with Tanahashi. I think it was Tanahashi and Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi. That match was a banger as well. Yeah, I could go on and on. I will never shut up. Maybe one day, since I'm training wrestling in Invicta Wrestling, new school. Shout out to Invicta Wrestling. Shout out to Baltazar, the Blood of Portugal, the current reigning APW champion, for making this possible. And maybe one day I'll be able to produce some classic match as well. Who knows? This year was crazy for professional wrestling and for life itself. Not just for me, but for the world itself. We are living in an era where everything changes, where everything goes upside down, and who knows what 2025 will bring. But I am hyped, and I hope you enjoyed this video and keep enjoying wrestling, because if it messes with your emotions, then that's something you must continue watching. Because if you were neutral to professional wrestling, then that means you're ready to move on to other things. But for me, I'm not ready to move on away from professional wrestling. I am just getting started now, on a literal way. So yeah, follow your passions, because dreams are spoilers on hold, and I'm pretty sure you are done waiting. Go get them. Peace and love. Bye.